All right, good morning. Thankful for a rainy Memorial Day weekend. The rain has sure been nice. We're grateful to God for it and grateful for guests today. See several folks with us today. Glad to have you with us and hope that you feel encouraged and welcome here. We're studying the book of Daniel right now, and it's a book that's rich with insight and encouragement for times when it's really hard to be a Christian, times when it feels like the environment we live in is somewhat hostile to that. So there's a ton in this book that really speaks to life in that kind of environment. Daniel chapter 5 is where we're at today, and it is the story from which the saying comes, the writing on the wall. So as we hear that in kind of everyday language, this is the story that came from, which of course we all know it means the signs are not looking good, right? We use that when we look at how things appear and we say, yeah, things are not looking, you read the headlines, you read the news, things are not looking good. The writing on the wall, which I think for many of us is sort of the general outlook we have right now. As we just look at the times that we live in, we would say the writing is on the wall. I was reminded of an interview. It happened last June. This is Carl Tekel. He is a Marine, World War II veteran hero. In this picture, an interview was done on his 100th birthday. I since learned that I think he passed away a couple of months after this interview was done. And if you saw it, it went viral, so a lot of people saw this video. And in it, he says the word nowadays. I love that, nowadays. And as soon as he says nowadays, he got emotional because he comments on seeing the decline of his country and saying everything that we fought for and that people died for is being lost. To use his words, it's all going down the drain. That's the way he viewed it. And we've talked about that already in this series. That and I'm not talking politically so much. It's just we see the erosion of Christian influence on our nation, and we feel like progress that was made and things that were so good and that we cherish are sort of going down the drain. And we feel sad. Maybe we feel anxious. Maybe we feel angry. The book of Daniel speaks to that directly. Daniel chapter 5. We're in a similar situation. When you move from Daniel chapter 4 to Daniel chapter 5, there's major decline in the place where this is all happening, in Babylon. Major decline. Where progress has made, major decline is happening. And we're going to see God in the midst of that, and we're going to get also an old man's take on the situation in Daniel chapter 5. So it begins in decline at a palace party. This is the setting of this story. The royal palace in Babylon. And we can date this pretty precisely. This is October 539 BC. Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Now just notice there we've got a new character, King Belshazzar. It's indicating to us that a lot of time has passed since chapter 4 where we were talking about King Nebuchadnezzar. It's been 23 years since King Nebuchadnezzar died. There's been several changing administrations. We've gone through 4 kings since King Nebuchadnezzar when we come to this story in chapter 5. And Belshazzar is not really the true king. He's the acting king, but he's the son of the true king. So you might think of him as being the crown prince. He's the son of Nabonidus. And historical records indicate that Nabonidus was on a 10-year absence in Arabia, the best we can tell. And so Belshazzar is serving as the acting king in his place. I want to stop on this verse real quickly because this is one of the verses that has been used to discredit the Bible. Because people have looked at this and said, Daniel didn't know his history. There was no Belshazzar. We know who the kings are. We've got other historical records, and this one's not in there. And so a lot of people have said, yeah, it's a myth. Well, they found in the ziggurat of Ur, they found 4 cylinders. This is one of the 4 cylinders right there, and it's currently in the British Museum. And it's written in the hand of Nabonidus, who is the true king, and he mentions his son Belshazzar as his firstborn son. And there's sort of a prayer in there for his son. And so it's one of those things that archaeology has demonstrated that Daniel did know what he was talking about in this book. So we've got this party. The acting king hosting a drunken feast with a whole lot of nobles. This was quite the party. And it's especially odd when you consider the historical situation that's going on. The Medo-Persian army is making advances all around Babylon. Babylon is in serious risk of falling. They are under great threat. And the acting king is having a party in the palace, getting drunk with his nobles. What is going on? Why is he doing that? There's all kinds of theories out there about what he might be trying to do, but the text itself indicates that it's what we would call hubris, or extreme arrogance, the cockiness of a fool. Look at verse 2. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So these are the holy vessels from the temple in Jerusalem, which was sacked, and people were brought into exile, and the items from the temple were brought to Babylon. They were looted by King Nebuchadnezzar, and now they're being used very profanely by Belshazzar. This is an open and direct offense toward the God of the Jews. No other king before him had acted in such a profane and arrogant way. These were also not only were they meaningful to the Jews, but these were like the treasures of Babylon's glory days. And so it looks like what this king is doing is he's saying, look at me. Watch this. You're seeing sort of the arrogance of him saying, I'll do what no other king before me has done. Watch what I'll do with these holy items, these so-called holy items. So what we're seeing is really the cockiness of a fool. In the middle of this party, we've got a great interruption. Look at verse 5. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. I love that. You've got this king and all of his pride and all of his arrogance, and right in the middle of one of this watch me moves. Look at me. Look what I'll do. Putting his pride on display, and then he sees the fingers of this hand, and his color changes. His limbs gave way. Literally in Aramaic, it's the knots of his loins were loosened. And a lot of people that I've read say that what that's indicating, I don't know how to put it, he had an accident, okay, would maybe be a way that we could say that. And so what you're seeing is this king who really thinks he's something, who parties when the enemy approaches, is completely undone when he sees this frightening thing that he doesn't understand on the wall. This is the famous Rembrandt painting of the scene. If you look closely at it, you can see that the king's color is different than everybody else's. It's a frightful moment. And it just struck me in thinking about this that, Belshazzar didn't know the world-famous painter was going to paint him. He was going to be remembered for many years, and I'm pretty sure this is not the moment he wanted to be remembered by, but it is. So he is frightened, his knees are knocking, his color is changed, and he calls for the experts. Verse 7. The king called loudly. You just notice the detail there. He shouted, or some have said he screamed, to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, you notice third ruler in the kingdom. That's because he is second. Nabonidus, then Belshazzar, and then he's saying, I will give you the one right after me, if you can read this and interpret it. Verse 8, then all the king's wise men came in, but they, no surprise, could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed again, and his lords were perplexed. The NIV says baffled. We've seen this before. New character. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall. Now, this was not his wife. We already know that his wives and concubines were there with him. This is most likely the queen mother. So it could be his actual mother who's coming in. But this is a highly regarded woman who comes in. And the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. We've heard that language before. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king. Okay, now father is used pretty loosely. It doesn't just mean your dad. It can mean your ancestor or your predecessor is the way that that's talking about. So King Nebuchadnezzar is his ancestor or predecessor. Your father the king made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers. Because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So the queen mother comes in. She says, you don't need to be alarmed. There is a man in your kingdom who has the reputation of being able to solve riddles like this. Call him in. So now we get to the old man lecture. This is where our main character enters the scene, Daniel. Now, as we read these stories, they move pretty fast, and we've gone from Daniel being a teenager to now an old man, and it's hard to keep that in mind that this is many years later. Daniel has now been in Babylon for 66 years, which means he's in his 80s. And if you're in your 80s, by saying old, I'm going to step on somebody. I'm going to be in trouble. He's an old man. He's in his 80s. Now, let's look at the interaction that happens between Daniel and the king. Verse 13. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, you are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of that matter. But I have heard that you can give the interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now, the way I read this is what you might call a condescending attitude that the king has toward Daniel. The detail in that language, you are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, taken captive by my father. He is sort of putting Daniel in his place. Now, Daniel's Babylonian name was Belteshazzar, very similar to Belshazzar. Their names are almost identical meaning. But it's like the king is saying, yeah, we're not the same, you and I. Our names may be different, but we are very different. You are Daniel, one of the exiles that my father took captive. Now, it's really fascinating to me that he uses Daniel in this, because if you'll remember, the meaning of Daniel's name, his Hebrew name, is God is my judge. So ironically, the king is saying what is happening in the story. God is my judge. Essentially, he's reminding Daniel, you are nobody, but if you can interpret, I'll reward you all the same. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. Now, I always try to sit with these and just think, what's the tone here? What's going on? And I'll tell you what I'm picking up on, and again, this is not, I'm going to get in trouble, but it's a little bit of old man attitude, I think, that's coming across here. He's just, in fact, this is kind of what I picture. He's saying, I'll do it, but you can keep the purple outfit. And then he does what is a classic old man move. He gives a lecture. Before he solves the riddle, he says, let me tell you some history. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed. Whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up. And whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne and his glory taken from him. That's chapter 4. That's the story we looked at last week. He's going back a few decades and saying, remember, the kingship of your father was given to him by God. And God humbled him. He was driven from the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives and your concubines, have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. If you take notes in your Bible, that's where you put the little fire emoji. That is a powerful speech to say to a king. He's saying, it seems you didn't pay much attention in history class. If you did, you would know God rules. The kingship of the greatest Babylonian king was given to him by God. And God can humble even the greatest of kings. And you, though you knew this, you have lifted your cocky self against the God who has your breath in his hands. It's a fiery speech. Now, to solve the puzzle, divine judgment. We finally get to the writing on the wall in verse 24. Then from his presence, the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. Okay, this is by the very hand that he's just said, holds your breath. And this is the writing that was inscribed, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Okay, in Aramaic, those are monetary units. It's the mina, the shekel, and the half shekel. But if you vocalize them differently, you'll get the interpretation of the puzzle. So this is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So the Aramaic words vocalized differently, they mean numbered, weighed, and divided. It's like he's saying, you and your rule have been evaluated by the Most High God, and you didn't pass. So time's up. You don't measure up, Babylon's going down. That's essentially what he's saying. So now we see the resolution of the story in verse 29. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom, which really doesn't mean a whole lot, because that very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Now, we're going to talk more about Darius the Mede next Sunday, Lord willing. The point here is that this is the enemy. This is the Medo-Persian Empire. What is being described right there is the fall of mighty Babylon in what amounts to about a single sentence. Just like that, it's over. And other historical records tell us that it happened about like that. There wasn't even a battle. They didn't even put up a fight. It was a divine judgment. Over in just a sentence. So, message for today. A couple of things I want to share with you after reflecting and studying on this passage. And they involve those themes that run throughout, especially the first half of this book, divine sovereignty and human responsibility. I want to think about that a little bit. One of the things that this impresses on us is that we are each accountable to God for what we do with what we know. God has revealed himself. He has made known so much about himself. And he holds us morally accountable for what we do with that. It's a reminder that there is a God in heaven who holds us accountable, who is the judge. And we need to be reminded of that. We see Belshazzar in his pride. He did not honor God, even though he knew. At some point, he knew that history about Nebuchadnezzar and the way that God humbled him. And yet, he lifted his hand high in an arrogant way against God. Even though he knew, he chose to dishonor. June is nowadays called Pride Month. It's a month where there's this prideful assertion of creatures over the Creator, and it's celebrated. And increasingly, it seems that with this month come profane mocking of all that we hold dear and all that God has revealed. It's one of those things that I think makes many of us sad, maybe sometimes angry. I couldn't help but think about it in this. We're looking at high-handed pride and Belshazzar, and we see it in our world today. Also couldn't help but think about Romans 1. Notice this language in there. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And when you set with Romans chapter 1, there's a lot that lines up with what we see celebrated in our world today, and we recognize that it is a rebellion of the creation against the Creator, to whom God will hold all human beings to account. I think it is right that we recognize that for what it is, that it is offensive rebellion against God, that it is creatures trying to be their own creators, to define our own morality and throw off what we know. And we all know a great deal more about God than what we might think. But I want to be careful, because while we believe as Christians very much that we do not align with or celebrate what is promoted and celebrated during so-called Pride Month, at the same time, we've got to be careful with, think about how to say this. We've got to be careful with our pronouns, because it's really easy to talk about they and them and miss what Romans 1 and 2 are doing. That Paul is saying, yes, that is a rebellion against the Creator, and he will hold them to account, but who are you to judge? Not who are you to say what's right and wrong, but who are you to think you have not equally committed offense before God? When you read Romans 2, and then you bring it into our world and you recognize, I don't agree with what they are promoting in Pride Month. It's very important that I, in my pride, don't think that I haven't done something equally offensive. We all need the grace of God. Another thing that comes out in this is that we are ambassadors of Christ. I love that language. Paul uses that language. We are ambassadors of Christ in every station and stage of life. We represent the King. We serve the King. We have a role of being his bold and faithful witnesses in every station of life, in every season of life. I love Daniel's bold, faithful witness in this passage. We see Daniel from the time he's a teenager to the time he's an octogenarian. And throughout the whole course of his life, it is clear where his allegiance lies. He serves the King of Heaven. He serves the Most High God. In every stage of his life, he's a witness to that God. And I think there's encouragement in us as we look at the whole range of ages in our congregation to be reminded we are called to that. Whether we are teenagers or whether we are old, in every season of life, we stand for the King. We represent him. We serve him and are unashamed and unafraid to be his people. Sometimes and I've not gotten there yet, but from conversations that I've had with people who are in the later years of life, sometimes you feel a little bit put out to pasture. A little bit like my time's done. Like, what am I? I'm just taking up space here. That is not true. Your bold and faithful witness looks different than it did when you were a teenager or in your 20s or in your 30s, but it matters just the same. One of my favorite lines in this passage is when that Queen Mother says, there is a man in your kingdom. Everybody had forgotten about him. He wasn't even one of the wise men that came out. He's sort of been put out to pasture, but somebody remembers and said, there is a man. It matters that there is a man, there is a woman, there is a boy, there is a girl who represents Christ in this world. And it may not come with fanfare, it may look very different than what you think, but in whatever way you are an ambassador for Christ, it matters that you are living for him in his kingdom in the midst of this world. We are ambassadors of Christ. The other thing is the sovereignty of God comes out in this passage. One of the commentaries that I was reading, it came to this. It said, the sovereignty of God, again. Every story in here is underlining that God is sovereign. And so I want to remind you today, oh man, I left this out. Let's just throw it back in there, okay? Philippians 2:15 through 16. It says, you will shine among a warped and crooked generation like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. It's really interesting there. Paul is using language from Daniel in that. And he's saying that's who we are. We are these, and I appreciate Anthony's prayer this morning, that we shine like a light in this dark world. We are those ambassadors. Okay, put that under the other point. Divine sovereignty. It's all in God's hands. Man, we can forget it from Sunday to Sunday. From morning devotional to morning devotional, we can forget it is all in God's hands. And it comes out so strongly in this passage. I love, Daniel says this in a way that would be really a rebuke to the king. The God in whose hand is your breath and whose are all your ways. The CSB says the whole course of your life. He has the whole course of your life. He has your breath in his hands, and you've not honored him. So it's a rebuke. But at the same time, to us, it is greatly encouraging. It is all in God's hand. He holds our life breath, and his fingers command all. It doesn't look like that when you read the news. It doesn't feel like that when you're in a warped and crooked generation, when you see all the things that are celebrated and done in our world today. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't look like that, but it is true. It is all in God's hands. He holds your life breath. Be encouraged by that this morning. His finger commands all. Should give us settled confidence as we live in a world that's changing, cultural landscape that feels like it's eroding. God's got it. Have a settled confidence in Him. That's part of our witness in this time, is that we are confident in the sovereignty of God. Fingers. I love that in this story. The fingers of that hand writing on the wall really stuck with me. I've read a lot about that this week. And the thing that I couldn't get away from thinking about Jesus was John chapter 8. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. You remember that scene? Oh, it's fascinating to me. You've got a woman who's clearly sinful. She's been caught. And everybody wants to do what the law says, stone her. And they bring this dilemma before Jesus. And he bends down and he writes with his finger on the ground. And he does it twice in there. And everybody wants to know. It's like the riddle in Daniel. You want to know, what does it mean? What did he say? I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. I don't have a clue. One of those things we're going to find out one of these days. But do you remember the effect of it? The effect of bending down and writing down and what he said? It meant that the older people walked away first, and pretty soon everybody that came prepared to throw stones at a woman who was guilty, they left without throwing them. You remember how the story ends, John chapter 8, verse 10, Jesus stood up, said to the woman, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." Oh my. The fingers of that same hand, that same sovereign hand, writing in the dirt. And in this story, what it spells is grace for a sinful person. And I just was reminded in thinking about it, God is the judge. He holds us all to account. But He came first to bring grace. He came first to save. He came first to forgive. The same fingers that can spell out judgment and that will spell out judgment were also nailed to a cross. We got to hear that. You got to hear it today because sometimes you feel like you're the one who God's judgment is coming down on you. He offers first love and forgiveness. He gives the cross. And as His witnesses in this world, we can't be just about the judge and forget about the one who had his hands nailed to the cross. We've got to be people that communicate that message, the message of a God who loves and forgives people who are guilty. And we all need that. This morning, if you need to respond to what Jesus has done for you in being crucified for your sins, if you need to embrace the gospel, put your faith in Him, be baptized into Him, or if you've got another need this morning, I want to invite you to come to the front while we stand and sing.